I had this problem of stamping the bottom of my pieces, and in this video I'm going to show you how I solved this, how I stamp the bottom of my pieces, and how I fill it in. Let's get into it. Step 1. Get measurements. I need 2 measurements. First, I am measuring the height of the piece I want stamped. My height is 7 centimeters, and I'm going to double this number, which comes out to 14 centimeters. The second measurement is the stamp. I'm going to measure out how big my stamp is and add 2 centimeters to this number. The math doesn't make any sense right now, and these numbers don't need to be perfect, but I'll explain the measurements in the next step. Here is a graphic that shows my dimensions. Step 2. Throw. I am using around 790 grams or 1 pound and 3/4 of clay. I'm using more than I think I need because it's easier to take off clay than it is to add more clay in this process. I'm going to center and cone, and then I'm going to cone up again, but aim for that 14 centimeters I calculated and leave it here. It doesn't need to be exact, but if I went way over or if it's too much, this is how I cut it. Then I'm going to make a top piece by flattening the top with my thumbs. This will be the platform that supports the stamp, and this is where I'm aiming for 5 centimeters. If my piece that I'm stamping was more curved on the bottom, like if I made a bowl, I'd leave this top a bit more curved, like you see right now. The bottom of the piece I'm working on is more flat, so I'm going to take a flat edge and make it flat. I like this part small because it's easier to manage and it will be less susceptible to crack off because I'm going to be applying pressure onto this top with my stamp. This will make more sense in step 4. This is how it should look. Notice how the stamp chuck is taller than the piece. It's important to make it taller, otherwise you can't use it. I've made one where it was too short and it kind of defeats the whole purpose of the stamp chuck. I just like to double the height of my piece in the beginning, but so long as this stamp chuck is taller, that's all that matters. So now we can head on to the next step of drying. Step 3. Let it dry. I let my piece dry uncovered because I need this to be bone dry or close to bone dry. Here's my piece the very next day. I did not cover it, I just let it dry out in the open and it is almost completely bone dry. The most important part that needs to be dry is this piece, and I'll give it a few pushes to test it out. I should not be able to push it in at all. If it's too wet, this will happen.
I don't understand.
And the stamp chuck will not be able to support or push back on the stamp. Unfortunately, it is a lesson I had to learn. So now that the piece is bone dry, we can move on to step 4, stamp. Step 4, stamp. I do my stamping immediately after I trim. If I wait too long and the piece is too dry, past leather hard, it'll be harder to stamp. I'll put my piece over the stamp chuck. And here are my stamps. These are my number stamps by Brian from the Laser Geek. I got these made so that the font matches the font of my logo. To get started, I'm going to tap where I want to stamp and move the chuck under it accordingly. Then I'm going to push down with my big stamp. I like to move in sections of right, left, top, and bottom, just to make sure the whole stamp is accounted for. If I wanted another section of my piece to be stamped, I move the chuck where I'm going to be stamping, like this. Then I tap to make sure it's where I want to stamp, and then I repeat. You can definitely make the top of the stamp chuck wider. I just like keeping it small so that it doesn't chip. If you do make it super wide, bisque-firing it would be good. I like putting the dates and giving it its own number because I think it makes it its own piece. I did this for all of my earlier pieces, and I think it's just cool to look back and see how my pottery evolves, and when it does. Step 5. Filling it in. To fill in my letters and numbers, I put underglaze in a dispenser bottle. Then I'll fill it in. If I use another color like white, pink, blue, I'll have to do a few coats. The nice thing about black is that it only takes one coat. This is how I clean out the tip of the dispenser. I have water in another dispenser. I'll put the tip on this bottle and squeeze out any excess underglaze. I can also use a needle, but this is an extremely thin tip, so I opt for water. If I mess up and underglaze gets out of where I want it filled in, I wait for the underglaze to dry completely, and then I'll use a needle tool to scratch it out. And that is how I stamp the bottom of my pieces. I hope you found this useful in some way. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.